does it feel when you're walking in somewhere? Do you feel, oh, so good and relaxed, you want to stay longer? Or do you have a bit of a chill and think, oh, I'm not quite sure. I'm just going to buy what I need to buy and then I'm going out again. Well, this is what's happening in our body when our environment get connected, when our body gets connected with the environment of a space. And today I am super, super happy all the way from Vancouver. We have Mark who's joining with us. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
My Feng Shui expert today. Mark, you've been doing Feng Shui for quite a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, my first introduction was, it's 25 years ago,
Wow.
1996 in the UK. Actually, I was living in London at the time.
Oh, were you?
And I did my training in 2001. So I'm now in 20 years of being certified and doing this work.
Wow. So how did you bump into it? What was
It
that?
was, like many, I think most of us have our "where were you when" moment,
Yeah.
right? With all of these big important things in our lives. And I mean, with Feng Shui, I think it's always synchronistic, right? Because that's kind of what Feng Shui really is. I'd moved to London and I moved in with a friend of a friend. I was looking for a flat and somebody connected me with a friend of his, and I had just previously lived in Japan. And I got really interested in the whole Asian mindset living there. And as much as I was living in Japan, I was really interested in Taoism and the Tao Te Ching, right? As in terms of, amazing philosophy.
Mhm.
And I was talking with with my new roommate about this. And he said, "Have you heard of Feng Shui?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Hang on a second." And he runs up to his room, comes back, and he has a book on it and hands it to me. And it was Love at First Sight. And
Wow.
right away, I was just like, this is what I've been after, So I was, and of course, I've changed a lot of my opinions and a lot of my ideas, but there was something immediately that spoke to me
Mm.
about it. Something that's a little spookier that I found out years later. There's this book called, I think it's Adventures of a Feng Shui Detective.
Oh, okay.
And I was
Oh,
looking
I
at the
would like
back of it. I
that.
was looking at the back of it, and the bio of the author stated that she worked at the Catherine Booth Hospital in Montreal. And I was like, I was born at that hospital. And so I mentioned to my mother, and she said, she was my birthing coach when I was pregnant with you.
Oh my word.
And so when I told my teacher, when I found that out and I told her this, she said, talk about born to do this work. I mean, she was just completely flabbergasted. So yeah, I mean, the messaging has been there all the time, I think, and my mother sort of had some practices in the home that I think were very Feng Shui that I still put into place today. So, I think it's always been around. But yeah, it's been 25 years since my introduction and 20 years professionally.
Wow, excellent. So so you were in Japan before, but then you went back. Obviously,
Mhm.
you worked quite a lot in Japan, haven't you? With
Yeah, I mean, I started working here in Canada, doing some consulting in 2001. I had a lot of friends who I stayed in contact with, having lived a total of 5 years in Japan in the 90s. And it was one of them who said, "Oh, there's a lot of people are talking about Feng Shui here. You should come over here and do some teaching and consulting." And, in true Feng Shui tradition, I managed to attract a free trip to Japan for a few days with a flight attendant friend. And I went for an interview at this organization, and the interview consisted of them putting the schedule in front of me and saying, right, when can you teach? And I started initially working with expats living in Japan. And then eventually one of my clients is a pretty high power business lady who really works in a variety of fields in alternative thinking and medicine and health and so on. And she just, again, accidentally kind of ended up becoming my agent there. And
Wow.
it's been going back 1, 2, 3 times a year since 2003, with
Wow.
obviously a bit of an exception in the last little while, unfortunately.
Yes, of course. We had a bit of a glimpse in there.
Yeah, a little bit of a shift in how we do things, but we've done some seminars on Zoom, and I keep doing distance consulting. So it's kind of fascinating that as much as we're working with spaces, time and space really becomes very relative, how we can really work with a camera and we can still get a sense, we can still see what's going on. And just like you and I are not in the same room, but we are in the same room.
Yeah,
Energetically,
we
it's
can almost touch each other, almost there.
that's it, just about.
How did you find actually working in Japan? Because you're obviously a white man, and going there into the country of, mind you, it's Chinese rather than Japanese, but they
Mhm.
um, that had was not a bit like, well, who do you think you are, kind of things.
Not as much as it would be in China, where it's their practice, and there might be that cultural, that belief that somebody from outside the culture can't really function with it. In Japan, it was actually it was very well received,
Mm-hmm.
and it still is. I think there's a certain. I think it's primarily my promoters' clients have a lot of faith in what she presents, and then the people who attend my seminars or so on. I think the logic of I practice a more contemporary approach. So I've really updated. I'm really focused on the practicality, on the emphasis. There's always a mystical side to Feng Shui, but I like to keep it very grounded and clear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I consider myself quite scientific in how I approach it and how I view it. And I think that's something that appealed to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've been very well received. It's definitely been interesting on different levels sociologically. The white male is kind of in Western culture is considered the majority, and you go somewhere when you're not the visible majority, and it's a fantastic and I think very important experience for people to go through. And that was in a sense what really attracted me to the originally Asian philosophy and so on, was the fact that everything that we've learned is just what we've learned and not necessarily true. And so learning that there are different ways of thinking and different ways of functioning, and it's always fascinated by what's cultural, what's local and what's universal. In a sense, when you look at behaviors and we look at what it is that we do, people in Japan living so completely differently. So, I was 22 when I first moved there. And so it was mind blowing
Yeah.
that, having grown up in North America, but with European parents. And then it was just, fascinating looking at, what's the way, and there isn't one way, but it's fascinating looking at, how we tend to consider what it is that's familiar as what should be right when there are really other wonderful ways.
Mm. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It is very interesting. I think when you also there's the outsider. When you're an outsider, you always look much more experienced. You always, people think that you're, that kind of real big guru kind of things. And where
Yes. He's coming from Canada. He must be good. I mean, it's there's definitely there's marketing, which ties in I think with the topic of business and so on, and perception and how you frame things for sure. But ideally, it's just for me, it should be really just about quality and about what it is that anybody does. But this, that what you're speaking to applies. I also work in the music industry. I have a long history with that, and I know that people who, it's very different for a musician when they travel somewhere for a gig versus how they're viewed in their home city or their home country. There's quite often a very, very different experience. But that's just kind of the way it is.
Well, that's really, really cool. Well, and Mark, so I have a few questions because obviously my thing is all about customer experience and how can we make our customer feel good? How can we make them want to stay longer, recommend us to our friends and family? And there's such a huge range of different kind of experiences that businesses are doing, especially in the retail. I mean, we see the retail, such a huge footfall of people. Obviously, perhaps not the last few months.
Uh,
The retail itself, the retail industry have a huge role in our communities, in our cities, in keeping our people together and those relationships. There's a real relationships in those shops and those retail environments. So how would you, I mean, you've done work with retails. What are the things that, you would kind of suggest that a retailer could do to kind of first improve that first experience, that first impression? It's always that first impression, isn't it, when you walk in somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's even before you walk in, it's from the outside. It's, what real estate agents refer to as curb appeal. There's so much that's essential, and I can bring in a few Japanese sort of hints here because it's surprising how much like the basics are really important, and we often don't think about that. And this is one of the challenges when retailers don't look at it from the view of the customer experience from their perspective, and they don't actually physiologically walk through and take themselves through the experience. They don't see those gaps and not just in service, which is a big part of it, but really in, what is that actual experience of looking, seeing, moving through, smelling, all of the senses and all of this. I had an interesting experience. There's in Toronto, a friend of mine runs the website Retail Insider, which is really devoted to high-end businesses,
Mm-hmm.
luxury brand businesses in Toronto and throughout Canada. And he took me to one of the major shopping streets where it was all, the high-end boutiques. And he said, some of this whole street is not what it used to be. And so there's, the economy shifting, where people are going are shifting and so on. And he said, I want to see if you can see who's doing well and who's not,
Oh, very
just
interesting.
based on looking on the outside.
Mm,
And I was 100% accurate
wow.
based on looking at about between 10 and 15 different places, looking at the signage, looking at, how clean, clear, visible were the signs, the ones that were older and hadn't been updated or cleaned were not doing as well. Some had, better illumination. The location of the signs, some of them were too high up to really comfortably see. There was nothing at eye level, which is then keeping things out of reach. I mean, there was all kinds of things. And then, the really grounded experience of, uh, at the entrance, one
Yes.
of the things that stunned me, and this was really stunning, and this ties into Japan, there was a super high-end clothing company, like very high-end, very famous, long history. And it was so dusty at the entrance. There was so much dirt, like, grit
Wow.
accumulated, no doormat, grit around the ground. I was just like, who's going to want to go in here? This is high end. You shouldn't be traipsing through muck. It should be spotless,
Yeah.
just like you expect. It doesn't match the branding at
Yeah.
all, but never mind just that branding, any place.
Mm.
And this is one of the things that you see in Japan every morning. Every shop, they have brooms there and they sweep the entrance every day. They do this kind of daily maintenance. It's absolutely phenomenal. And our mutual friend Amanda, in Texas, fabulous Feng Shui consultant and a great Instagram buddy of mine, she loves sweeping. She's big on the brooms. And when they just had that snowstorm in Texas, I was just teasing her. I was like, I bet you're out there with your broom instead of your shovel, right? Because nobody has a shovel in Texas. And this whole thing of sweeping, the Japanese do it religiously.
Mm.
So much so that I was speaking with a residential client here in Vancouver, and I was pointing out that he should, there's leaves accumulating at his front door. He should sweep. And they was like, oh, whoever lives across the road from you looks like they're doing a good job. He said, oh, she's Japanese. So it was kind of amazing, right? That why do we not? Why do we not do this daily maintenance? And it's a little bit like, had my shave this morning. I was thinking, after a couple of days, it's harder to shave because there's more stubble buildup. It takes longer. And it's a
Yeah,
little
I've got
bit
the
the
same
same.
problem.
Yeah, I don't think you quite have to worry about it. But, so there's more resistance. And so when things build up, there's more effort required and you have to do it differently than
Mm.
if you do things regularly. And so it looked like nobody had swept up for days. And my friend leans over and he said, it's not announced yet that the shop's going to be closing.
Oh, well, that's not surprised then.
And it's this is high end, like international brand, right?
Mm.
So for me, it was also not just what was going on there, but if you don't pay attention to that level of detail,
Mm.
you are similarly not paying attention to all of the marketing, accounting, other details that are required to run the business efficiently.
Mm.
This is where it's all transferable. And I think this is something that we look at in Feng Shui, how one thing relates to another and everything's connected. And
Yes.
the mindset, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Mm.
And so that was one of the really fascinating things, is just looking at the entrance. So I think that this curb appeal thing is very, very real.
Yeah.
Can you see the signage? Can you access the door? Can you see what it is that it's going to be like inside? Do you form a positive impression
Mm.
based on what's going on just from the outside?
Absolutely. And when we do mystery shopping program, those kind of are the first, that first impression are key, really, because if you don't get that first impression right, people will probably move on. Or if they
That's
go in, it's because they may need something. They'll pick up whatever they need and then they'll come out again.
Absolutely. I mean, once they're inside, if the inside's better than the outside, they might actually have a great experience. But you do want to create some consistency, and we want that allure, literally, to get them to go into the space. I also saw a really interesting Feng Shui related story here in Vancouver. This is also a shop that's got international coverage. It's very famous, so it's got a reputation. It's got its its loyal customers, and like a lot of these shops, they'll change their displays every week. And I was walking by and I noticed that they'd set up the display counter inside with the corner of the table pointing towards the door. So instead of you facing the edge of the door. And so anybody in Feng Shui knows this is a big no-no, right? Corners are considered aggressive. And what this was like, it was like this knife, in a sense, pointing out the door. And I stood outside and I watched all these people walk up to the door, look in, and walk by and continue walking by. And I saw it was 9 out of 10 people
Wow.
walk by rather than go in. And again, this is a place that has its loyal clientele and is very, very well known. Everybody will know it. And so it was fascinating seeing that, somebody just happened to do this, didn't know that that's a, Feng Shui faux pas. And it was consequential. And this is the challenge, I think, when it comes to Feng Shui. People hear the term and they think it's woo-woo, or that, I'm going to have to sort of, put wind chimes and bamboo in a space that doesn't match, and, certainly when you're talking luxury brands, obviously, they know that doesn't fit. And that's not how we apply it. It's not how I apply it in homes, and it's not how I apply it, unless a customer wants it. And it's certainly not how I apply it in businesses. But this was very real. This principle, which is a basic Feng Shui principle. And this is in Feng Shui 101, when it comes to sharp corners and so on. It was having an economic impact.
Direct impact on it.
So clear that fewer people were entering, felt welcome to enter, not for reasons that they were consciously aware of. I also saw something similar in Toronto with the same fellow. We were doing a tour there where he said there was a very, again, high-end mall that was having trouble. And so we walked in and there were 5 mannequins set up facing the door. So in other words, like the traffic is like going out the door instead of drawing in. But it was like an obstacle course to get past these mannequins. So I mean, 3 is probably enough. You might want 1, but if you're creating, the visual, the impression of a mass of people leaving the store instead of people coming in, and you're making it you've narrowed down the passageway for people to actually physically walk into the space. You're not making it easy. You're not creating that, literally the experience of flow and the experience of, entering.
Yeah.
And it was high end, but they dressed them up in some fancy punk sort of stuff. So they were literally like studded jackets and all of this. So it's like you're walking into a high end place and you feel like you're being accosted by ruffians. It's like, it's not, like this cool punk thing. It's like, it's not cool when they're accosting you when you're trying to walk in. It was literally just the messaging was so off and so inconsistent with what it is that they would really be trying to do. It was pretty phenomenal.
And the thing is as well, it's sometimes is because people aren't, they're in their business, they just don't see it, isn't it? Having somebody from the outside walking in and asking you those questions, it's
Absolutely.
like, why are you doing this? Or what is
Mhm.
that all about? And suddenly they're like looking at it thinking,
Well, this is it. It's,
and
we've all got our own lens of perception and way of seeing things. This is where we need feedback and we need outside perspectives for people to see things with fresh eyes.
mm,
And, just because somebody intends something to work in a certain way, intention is powerful, but there's also, reality can override your intentions if
mm,
it's misaligned. And in, regular, domestic feng shui, you'll see this where, single female clients with artwork of single women, which is very common. And they think, oh, it shows confidence and it shows strength. And it's like, and it doesn't show partnering. And
mm,
it doesn't mean you can't have those qualities as an individual, but if that's all that you're showing, if you're not showing that working with a partner, then it's not communicating the right message.
mm,
And I've had clients who, got divorced and they have this morose looking woman sort of hunched over in this artwork by the bed, which she bought after the divorce. And she thought this character looked strong. She said she
wow,
looked strong. I was like, she's hunched over. She's got her back turned to you. It's dark. What looks strong? And this is what's fascinating, that we can
mm,
all interpret it in certain ways, but there might be, a reality that overrides your personal interpretation. So it's
mm,
so important for
mm.
individuals and retailers, I think, to have that willingness if they really want to do well and they want to improve, to get that kind of alternative feedback, which is what you do with with your clients and what I do as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's also I talk a lot about the neuroscience as well in our brain and
Mhm.
how our brain connects to the certain part of it. And actually, I always talk about smells and the five senses. And actually creating my own perfume, it's
Ah,
called Eau d'Abeille, and the
yeah,
idea behind it was to actually encourage businesses to use the smell to connect at that emotional level.
it's so huge. I mean, we don't pay attention to, when you add something to the to a dimension that you normally don't notice or recognize, it enhances the experience, right? So smell is something we usually don't notice unless it's a good smell or a bad smell, like it's just kind of neutral. And so when you take the time to decorate the air, and
Mm,
it's the same with music, that the air is carrying something that enhances your experience. It's very, very different. I've got my little, one of my little aroma things, and a friend of mine just brought this back from the States, and it's one of my favorite ones. And, our border's closed right now, so I haven't been able to go down to the shop for a year. And so my dear friend happened to, scroll through our chats and realized when she was there on a business trip, and she brought back this thing, and it gives
good.
me the most joy. It's this gorgeous lemon myrtle spearmint, like alive. And, a couple of spritzes, and all of a sudden my experience is different. I feel better. I enjoy, these are simple things.
Mm,
It can, and it's just like music as well in a business. Music can either make or break the
mm,
experience. Any of these things, the wrong smell, people will leave.
mm,
They won't necessarily leave if there's no smell, but if there's a good one, then you'll enhance it. With with no music, they might notice it, they might not. With the wrong music, they will definitely notice it.
mm.
And with the right music, it will actually encourage them. I heard someone say recently, there were some studies that, if there's the right kind of music that appeals to when people were younger and more carefree, so more retro music,
Right.
will tend to put people more in mind of a time when they had fewer worries, and they're going to be more comfortable and more leisurely in the environment that they're in. It's fascinating and absolutely logical.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the NLP techniques as well, isn't it? It's about building that rapport. How do you build a rapport? Is you finding that commonality, something that they felt good, that anchor moment where they felt good, and then you can, really kind of create that moment or talk about that moment to make them feel good and make them feel come back into that yeah, that moment.
Yeah, and that said, I know there's also data where they look at certain times of the day. You want the BPM, the beats per minute to be at a certain pace, and you want this pacing to be at it. And if you do it too much like that, I mean, there is the data to support it, but if you are manipulative with how you do it,
Mm,
if it's not inconsistent, if the music choice is only to do that and it doesn't actually represent the brand or it doesn't
Yeah.
actually represent the atmosphere, and they're just, we're just choosing it on beats per minute because this is what's going to get the customer sort of walking at the right pace, as opposed to, well, what is music at that beats per
Yeah.
minute?
Yeah.
Then it just becomes this artificially constructed, correct experience that lacks actual life and true experience.
Authenticity. Yeah. I guess it's like, people selling, when you're teaching selling how to sell something, the more authentic you are, the better you will sell. As long as you're selling to what's right for the customers, this is what we want. We
So,
need to stop that kind of hard sells, double glazing kind of, 70s kind of thing.
mhm.
Generally what's right for our customers. And, this is also true, the environment for our customers, but for our employees who work in those retail spaces or work in those environments
Mhm.
10, 12 hours, maybe sometimes more, they need to feel right themselves, don't they? To be able to deliver that service, to have that smile on their face, to give their customers to be
Absolutely.
present.
And there, therefore, I find it's really important, how the management treats their employees and also how the space supports them, because that's the unseen side. What's happening backstage. This is what will often happen, and especially in high-end places, and I've seen this a lot, in every place that I've worked in, where things are beautiful in the salon or in the shop and so on, and then the employee has this tiny little room that they can go to that's crammed, and that's where they're supposed to eat there, or the employee washroom is
Yes.
horrible compared to what the customers have, and all that's going to do is to breed resentment
Yes,
between
absolutely.
the employee and the customer. They're going to resent the fact that the customer they are the ones that have to treat the customer well
Mm.
when they themselves are not being well treated.
Mm.
And it should be a no-brainer what it is that these companies would spend on improving the employee conditions. Is they would more than make up in improve sales because of the better service that the
Oh,
employees
yes.
will automatically be giving.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely, for me, it's a no-brainer in terms of an investment
Yeah,
to support the
absolutely.
employees in that way.
I love you, Mark. I love
Well,
you.
we think in the same ways. I mean, so it's and this is the challenging thing that when we're talking about this stuff, and you and I both get this, and it's common sense, and when people hear it, it's common sense, but it's not common these
Yes, this
days.
is the
And so
difference.
it's such a joy when we're like, oh yes, somebody gets it.
It's like we're talking the same language. We can
I
skip.
know, exactly. And I mean, and this has been such a difficult time now, this whole COVID, we're at a year now where a lot of businesses, from when a lot of businesses first had to shutter, and there's been, different places that have different degrees of openness. So, businesses need to do whatever it is that they can
Mhm.
to provide this service. And, you might be, people are harried and they're overwhelmed, and, they don't want to think, oh, I don't want to sweep the front door. Well, guess what? This is actually these kinds of things, and having the good signage, and not just scotch taping things in the window, and all of these basic things,
Mm.
they all go a really long way
Yeah, absolutely.
towards improving the customer experience. And it's horrible to see how difficult it's been for
Mm.
so many businesses. And I just think that some of these the simple care of putting yourself literally in the customer's shoes, as you walk through, literally and figuratively, but like walking through and physically experiencing the entire space, that's the only time you really get to
Yeah.
notice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Mark, this was just amazing. Thank you so much. It was just brilliant
You
chatting
for
to
inviting
you.
me.
If anybody wants to know more about you or work with you, where do
Yep.
they go? How do they
Uh,
find
senseofspace.com. And if you want my social media, the top right of that website, at least as it's currently designed, it's going through a redesign. But the top right has all my social media tabs. So I'm there on Instagram. It's there. It's sense_of_space, and Facebook as well. And yeah.
Fantastic.
I
Fantastic. Let's
love working. I mean, and just like you and I are able to have this conversation at a distance, distance really doesn't make a difference. First office I designed was in Qatar.
Oh, wow.
And it was before Zoom and Skype and so on. So it was done,
Wow.
sort of, yeah. And my first
Awesome.
distance consultation to Japan was 2004. And it was literally, they had to mail the photos. I mean, it was back, it was, it was a very different kind of experience. So right now, we're so lucky really right now with Zoom and with being able to have these conversations and to connect, the media really supports us being able to work in all kinds of creative ways. And with Feng Shui, I think that's definitely the case.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, I'm loving it and I can't wait for us to do something again, perhaps maybe on Clubhouse, maybe on other social media. We'll be
Yeah.
doing a lot more things together and have a fantastic day. And I'll speak to you very, very soon.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Bye. Bye for now. Bye, everybody.